Here's the thing, data is everywhere on the internet, and the beauty of data is that we can consume it. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you how to use Python to consume data that is somewhere else on the server through APIs, application programming interface. And so let's go ahead and do that, because I think that's one of the biggest skills that you need to have in order to be able to interact with different databases, things that are beyond our control. So let's go ahead and learn how to consume data from the internet, in this case, in the form of APIs. The World Wide Web has a lot of data out there. And so learning how to consume online data in the forms of APIs, which is application programming interfaces, or even getting files online like CSV files or PDFs or many other types of files out there, and be able to use those files and APIs, consume that data, and do things with that data. It is the center objective when it comes to building applications that are useful. Okay, so we're going to embark on an overview of how to consume data online via APIs, as well as downloading files and read those files so we can hopefully do something useful. So if you go to Google and say JSON placeholder, you should see something like this, JSON placeholder, and let's go ahead and click that. The JSON placeholder is a free online REST API that you can use whenever you need some fake data. Yes, we're going to start with fake data. I apologize. Okay, so let's go ahead and click and see here. And if you scroll down, you can see it says fetch, and then we have this HTTPS URL, which we can use. We can fetch different endpoints. So this is JavaScript, right? I'm going to click here, and we'll see we have this map, which is a dictionary, essentially, right? Key value pair. So this is JSON. And if you scroll down, you can see we have different resources. Resources in this case are endpoints where we can get data. So we can get photos, for instance, and you can see if I click, we get this whole JSON payload, which essentially is a list that contain objects or dictionaries. Or we can go to to-dos, as we've seen before. We have, again, this list with objects. In this case, they are dictionaries. Okay, so different endpoints here. Let's go ahead and start with posts first. So I'm going to copy this URL here because that's what we're going to be using. Copy that, go back to our code, and I will say URL, paste that. Actually, this has to be inside of double quotes. Make this a little bit smaller so we can see. All right, so the first thing we need to do here is to make sure that we have the correct package so that we can go ahead and parse through this JSON placeholder endpoint here. So let's go ahead and open our environment here. Make sure that we have our virtual environment running. And I'm going to say pip install, and I want to install requests, which is the package that we need for us to be able to tap into this endpoint and get some data. Okay, hit enter. And for me, it's going to say that it's already installed, already satisfied, which means already installed because we did install earlier. And in your case, if you hadn't installed it, then it should install. So what we'll do next is, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and import requests. So say import requests as such. I'm going to send an HTTP request to this endpoint and receive something in return. So I'm going to say res for result, and I'm going to use requests and send dot. You can see we have get, post, request, session, put, delete, and so forth. So we want to get. Get, if you have over, is a function that goes ahead, sends a get request to a server, in this case, and we expect to get something. So I'm going to go ahead and pass URL, which is going to be the URL that we're passing there. In this case here, because URL and URL are all the same, these named parameters, I can just go ahead and remove that. That is the same thing that would work. Let's go ahead and print our res to see what will happen and run. And you can see we have a response object and 200. So 200 is the code to say that the response came in positively, nicely, and there were no problems. So what's happening here? Let's go ahead and say, for instance, because we know it's an object, let's go ahead and say res dot. Okay. If you say res dot, you can see there's a lot of things that happens here. We have headers, we have history, we have cookies, we have status code. Let's go ahead to status code and see what that's going to give us. Say status code like this. In fact, I'm going to just get all of this and paste all in there. Okay, let's run again. And then you see we get status code 200, which again tells us that the request, HTTP request, was successful. That's why we have 200. But then I can check out to see, okay, what else can I get from our res? If I say dot, you can see we have text, we have content, we have headers, and we have JSON. Okay, let's start with the text. What is that going to give us? So it's a property. Let's go ahead and run again. Okay. So once we do that, we can see that we have the actual payload of the data that we want, right? So which is, in this case, this data here. Okay, what if I wanted to perhaps, let's go back here so we can see. We know this is a list, right? And we can go ahead and get each one of these dictionaries inside of this list. And to get the first item in a list, we know we go to, yes, the first index. So is it possible for me to go like this and add 0? Let's see what will happen. Let's run again. And we got this one character, which indeed is this here, okay? The square bracket. That's very confusing because we actually want to go and get the first item of this list. The reason why we're getting that is because when we say res.text, we're actually getting all of this as a text. Right? It's all just a long string. So when we say square bracket 0, we're actually getting the first character of our long text, which is not what we want. We'll come back to that. Let's go ahead and see something else. Let's go ahead and say content, for instance. What is that going to give us? Let's run. Okay, so it looks like it goes ahead and gives us the actual contents. If you hover over, you can say that content of the response in bytes. So give us the response in bytes format. Now, what happens if I say dot and go to JSON? What is this going to be? So JSON is indeed a function. So I'm going to go ahead and go like that. All right, let's go ahead and run again. Let's go ahead and run. And as you see now, we have a different format. So this is indeed a JSON format that is going to be coming in so we can actually use it. So this case here, if I hover over, is going to say returns JSON encoded content of a response. Now, let's see if we wanted to get the first item. I'm going to say 0, just the first object. I can do as such. So we're going to return the whole JSON payload as you see here. And I know indeed that this is a list. So I can go to the 0th. So essentially got to go to the 0th index and see if I can get this dictionary, which is an object. Let's see if this is going to work. Okay. It worked because this JSON is going to return, in this case, a JSON object, which is a Python dictionary. So then we can go ahead and get items inside of that array or list in this case, right? So now I have this object, just one object, one dictionary. And if I want to go and get, in this case, the user ID, I can go ahead and continue and get, let's go ahead into title, actually. I'm going to say title. And go ahead and run again. We should just get the title, which is this Latin gibberish. So we're able to use requests to tap into an API to get a response and then display on screen. We're able to probe in and get the correct values that we want from our JSON object. Okay, so now that we know how to get information from an API, in this case, this JSON placeholder. So this is the same thing you would do for any API out there. If you want to get more APIs, you can just Google free APIs and you will get a lot of different APIs you can work with, such as news APIs, Bitcoin APIs, and so forth. So there's a lot of data out there, but the same thing you would do to access, of course, those APIs. Now we know that our data here is actually a list containing a lot of different posts. Right? So what we can do, of course, we can for loop, add a for loop here for post in posts. Actually, in this case, is res. So let's just say posts like that, right? And I can say print post title, make this an f string, and pass post dot. And you can see if I say dot, I can go ahead and get something. Well, I'm not going to be able to do that. And then I can say post, I want the title like this, right? So let's go ahead and run this real quick. Okay, looks like, right. Okay, so that is the problem. I forgot to actually make sure that the posts that I'm getting. So I'm going to say posts. Let's say res first. Okay, let's go back to what we had there. Okay, let's say posts is equal to res.json because I want to get the JSON object. So we are able to then do what we need to do. All right, let's run and we should see all of the titles for our post. So of course, if we want to get something else, we have actually a lot of posts here, but we can limit the posts that we're getting by passing something else here. So when I say posts, I can, because I know it's coming in as a list, I can limit it to say just 10 posts like that. So you say colon, so it's sort of like a range. It's going to be from 0 up to 10. Okay, so if we run this now, get at least fewer posts than before, about 10. And the other thing we can do also, we saw that we say get here, we're getting something, right, from our URL, in this case, pulling in the payload. We can also make a post request. So a post request is the request that allows us to post something to the server. Now, this is, of course, a fake API, but it actually allows us to do so as well. So what I will do here, let me go ahead and comment this out. And here I'm going to create a data object, essentially a dictionary, and I'm going to put a title for the key, and then let's say Python and API, something like that. And then for the body, say, let me be consistent here. This is a test, and let's add user ID. So user ID, say 3 or 2. All right, so we have our payload data that needs to be posted into our API JSON placeholder like that. And I know that because you can see here, we must pass in a user ID, also ID. We don't have to pass that because I think that's going to be added automatically, title, and the body. So now that we have that, we can simply just say response and then say requests. Again, use our requests package there. And then we can see we have the post method. To post, of course, we're going to pass the URL. So the URL is what we already know. And then we need to pass the data. The data is JSON type. So I'm going to pass here data. And what we'll do also, I'm going to print the response that we received. So I'm going to say response.json like this to see what comes back. So usually when we do this, in this case here, we should receive a response which will have exactly what we have passed in. Okay, let's go ahead and say app and run. You can see we got the response, which is exactly what we have for our data. All right, so this is just an example to show you that you can do get and you can do post requests. Now let's create a new app here, a new program that will go ahead and allow us to look for a book, in this case, a list of books from an API. This is going to be a Google Books API. So you'll have access to the link. So essentially, this is the endpoint, googleapis.com/books, v1 volumes, and then you pass the query as you see there. So you can say Python. You're going to get this payload with all of the books related to Python. So it's a pretty complicated payload. As you can see here, it's an object or a dictionary that contains a few fields, and then some of these fields also contain a list. For this case, items will contain a list of all of the books pertaining to this query. So let's go ahead and use this API and create something fun. So I created a book search directory here, a new project, so that it's separate from everything. Now, because I'm still using the same VNV virtual environment, we still have the requests installed. So I can just come here and say import requests as such, so we can start using it. So I'm going to create a function first here to make it better, called fetch books. And so this function here is going to take in a query to start with. Okay. And so what we'll do here, let's go and add doc string here. Say fetch books from Google Books API based on the query. All right. And so I'm going to add the API URL here, which is essentially what I've added before. So for now, let's just add the whole thing with the Python here. Actually, we can remove that. I'm going to make this f string so that we can pass the query like such. And this has to be equal like this. So the idea is that when we call this function, we're going to pass the query, let's say Python, and that's going to be passed in the query string there. And then we're going to hit the API to get something. Okay, so let's go ahead and say response. So essentially what we've done before, and say requests, and then say get. Of course, I'm going to pass the API, which is API URL as such. Okay, so our response here, I'm going to say books. I'm going to get all the books. I'm going to say response.json because I want to transform what we're getting in our response here into a dictionary object that we can look through. All right, so let's go ahead and return books. Okay, so we have our fetch query here, fetch books, and then let's go ahead see how we can call it. So I'm going to create a function called main just to differentiate everything, and I'm going to call fetch books, and the query I'm going to pass here, let's say Python. All right, and let's call this main. I'm going to say if name is equal to like that, then I'm going to call the main function. All right, let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so of course it worked, but nothing is showing. And you know why? Is because I need to print it out. So I'm going to say books as such, and let's go ahead and print our books. Okay, let's try it again. And voila, you can see we have this whole payload here with a lot of books. Okay, so it's kind of almost like too much. So what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we get what we need. So if you look at this payload here, there's a lot of things. So we have the object, in this case, the dictionary, and then we have the items. So the items is what's holding everything, right? So we're going to have to go to items, which is a list, and then we have yet another object. So pretty complicated here, but it's okay. So what we want to do is we're going to get this big payload and go to items and go into the volume info, because the volume info is where we can get the information about each one of these books. So what I mean by that is once I get to that, you can see I can get a description of the first book, I can get the authors, I can get the title. So in this case here, I'm going to go back to our and say something like for item, or say book in books, and I'm going to say dot get, because I want to make sure that if this is not feasible, then I fail gracefully instead of accessing with the square brackets. And so I'm going to go to items. So essentially, I'm going to go to items, which indeed is a list. And if something goes wrong, I can also say that it just returns an empty list if we don't find this. All right, that's the beauty of get. All right, so once I am inside here, I'm going to retrieve a few of these keys. The first key I want to go and get is this volume info. So let's go ahead and get that. So inside of book here, I can say info. I'm going to set that to item because now this item actually is a book. Let's change this to item because it's not necessarily a book yet. So I'm going to say item. And then I'm going to, because I know it's a list, I'm going to go ahead and get the volume info. So copy that because this is the key I want to get, which is going to have the information about the book. All right, so get that key. And what else I want to get? Well, and then I'm going to get the title of the book, which I can get that from info again, right? Because I am inside of info now. I got this info object dictionary, and I'm going to go and get the title and anything else I need. Okay, so I'm going to say info info.get, and I'm going to say I want title. And if there's no title, I'm going to say, just say no title. All right. And let's get authors. Now the authors, as you can see here, it is indeed a list, because right now it has one, but some books may have more than one author. So we need to account for that. To account for that, it's very simple. We're going to join. So I'm going to say comma, space, and then say dot join. So each one of these items, I'm going to say info dot get, and I'm going to get the authors. Remember, I'm getting this one here, key, and then I'm going to add comma. If nothing is there, I'm going to say no authors. So each time we go through and it's going to look at these authors list, pull that information. If we have more than one, we're going to get all those authors and separate them by comma. So J, comma, Paul, comma, Arthur, and so forth. If there's nothing, we're just going to send an empty list. And the next thing I'm going to add is publisher. So in this case here, I need to get the publisher. So it's very simple. I just say info get publisher. I always make sure to copy actually what they have there as such. And then if there's nothing, say no publisher. Okay. And then for each one of these, I'm going to go ahead and say print title of the book. So I'm going to say pass in the title and then put that in a new line, pass in authors and a new line and say publisher. This has to be authors and then publisher, let's such. Let's make sure I have everything correct. Okay, that should look great. Now if I save this, you will see that we're going to get something better than all of these things that we have received here first. Okay, let's go ahead and clear this and run. Looks like we have a problem. Takes exactly one argument, string join. Okay, I made a mistake here. It's okay. So we have info.get authors. This should be like that because it's all inside of just one long. So we have this first one here. And then we have this second argument. All right, that was the problem. If we run, we should see something nice. Voila, you can see we have the author for Automate Boring Stuff, Python 2nd edition, and we have the publisher and everything. So you can see that we have all that information showing here. So for each one of those books. And let me make sure I add a new line each time we finish displaying this book so that we have a cleaner user interface. So let's run again. Voila, you can see we have the title, authors, and publishers, and then space, and so forth. So this is working perfectly. Now, we don't want this to be like this, right? We want to take this and put in a different function. That way, we are compartmentalizing everything. So I'm going to create a new function here called display books and pass in the books. So essentially, it's going to do all these things that we've done here. So I'm going to copy all of this, I'm going to cut and put in here. So now all I have to do in main, after I've gotten the books, I can just call the display books and pass our books such. And I'm going to run just to make sure, but it should all run just like we had before. Very good. So that means if I change, of course, the query, because I have changed the query here to, let's say, cooking, books about cooking, and I run, I should get a few books about cooking, right? So the title, the authors, the publisher, and so forth. The other thing I want to do, if I wanted, I can also get the book description. So I'm going to say description, and I can get the book description from here, right? Volume info. So same thing, I'm going to say info.get is just called description, and I can add something that says no description if that is the case. All right, it's just in one place, and I can make sure to show that description, pass in description, and let's not forget the new line as such. Okay, so now it's a little bit more because there's a lot of information here. Title, author, publisher, and we do have the description for each one of those books. All right, very good. One thing that will make this program even better is if we made it so that users can actually enter the search term themselves. Ah, yes. So to do that, first of all, in main here, I'm going to say search term. And as you know, I'm going to use the input function, okay, which will say enter a search term, like that. And then let me go ahead and get rid of this for now. And then here I'm going to add the while loop, right? So I'm going to say while true. I'm going to say books. I'm going to set that to fetch books, just like we had before. And I'm going to pass the search term. This is query. So for query, I'm going to say the search term now, which is going to be whatever users have entered. And I'm going to check if not books that get items, right? So if I don't get anything, then I'm going to just print no more results, just to make sure we are safe. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and call display else. I'm going to go ahead and display the books. So passed for books, I'm going to pass our books as such. And because they have the same name, I can just pass books like this. And here, if I can, here I'm going to say if search term, say lower as such, is equal to quit. Let's just break out of this program. All right. All right, let's go ahead and run this to see if this will work. I'm going to run. All right. Search term. Let's say pizza. I hit enter. And voila. It's going to go ahead and give us all the books about pizza. So again, it's title, 3 lines in a circle. Looks like we have different kind of books here. And we have the pizza Bible. So there's a lot of information here. The Everything Pizza Cookbook and Homemade Pizza Cookbook and all of these great books there. All right, very good. So this is indeed working. We're able to now pass in the books. Now the thing here, I have an infinite loop here. Let's go ahead and say Control C to get out of that loop. So I'm going to remove this just to make it even better. So what I'll do here, I'm going to say next step. I'm going to add another input here. So I'm going to say enter any key to exit, like that. And then I'm going to check if next step is not, if not next step for now, and say type done to quit. All right, let's make sure indentation. And so now I'm going to say if next step dot lower is equal to done, then we just go ahead and quit. So say break as such. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Okay, let's say bread. All right, so we have everything. So we got the Wild Bread book. We have the bread, Jeffrey Hamelman, and so forth. And at the end, we have type done to quit. Okay, so say done, and voila, we're done. Okay, so our program here is working quite nicely because now we are passing in a search term, which we add that search term into our query, fetch books, so that we can get those books related to the search term. So far, this awesome program is working quite nicely, but let's make this even better. So the first thing, let's go up here where we fetch books, the function, and we're going to add a few more things here in this API URL to make this even better, as well as passing a few other things here. So I'm going to add a start index because, as you know, this brings in a lot of books. Okay, so in one setting, sometimes can bring over 1,000 books. We want to make sure that if that is the case, we can use pagination to allow users to go to the next page with data, as opposed to pulling everything in one place. So we're going to say start index, and then I'm going to pass also the max results per time per each page. I'm going to say 10. All right. And so we'll have to change a few things in our API here, URL. So we have the volumes and everything is good. We're passing the query, and then we can pass the ampersand here to say we want to add other things along this query. Okay, so I'm going to say start index and set that to start index. And then I'm going to also say ampersand and add max results, because this is something we can pass into this URL. Okay, and then I'm going to pass the max results as such. Okay, so once I have that, then I can change a few things inside of our main. So let's go back to main here. So this will change a little bit in the sense that I want to change that to say press N for next page of results or any other key to exit the program. So now we're going to change the way we're doing things here because we want to include something else. So we'll say if next steps is not equal to N, that means we want to break out of this. We're done. In any other case, then we're just going to go ahead and say start index, and we're going to increment that with max results, which we haven't created because we're inside of main. So I'm going to create those variables. So start index is always 0, and then max results we want 10 at a time. So essentially the user can press N to load the next page of results or any other key to exit the program. So pagination in this case is handled by incrementing the start index by the results. So in the beginning, if start index is 0, we're going to increment it by 10, and then next time, if it's 10, we add another 10, which is going to be 20, and so forth. Okay, so now I'm going to save this. We should have everything set up. I'm going to make this perhaps larger. Let's go ahead and run. Okay, let's say fishing. Hit enter. Okay, looks like start index is missing. Right. Let's go back here. When I say fetch books, I need to pass those arguments. So let's say start index, pass the start index, and max results, pass max results as such. All right, that's what we needed to do. Let's run. Let's continue with fishing. Okay, it's going to think, and okay, we have a lot of information that we received. We should at least get 10 first. Okay, and then we have here press N for next page. So if I go ahead, look at the last one was beyond catch and release. Let's go ahead and say N for next page. Hit enter. Looks like we don't have any more. Let's start where it is not associated with a value. Let's make sure we have some issues. This is start index. There we go. Fishing. Okay, we got beyond catch and release, the last one. Let's go ahead and say N. Okay, it's going to go ahead and give us more. Very cool. We're going to go ahead and say N again. It goes back and keeps giving us more books, Fear of Flying Fishing. And let's continue next. And voila. And what I can do here is I can also print out, so we know, let's print out the index each time, right? Say pagination number, something like that. And this is going to be F string, and pass the start index so we can see each time that we do that, that number should be increasing by 10, essentially. Okay, I'm going to say N to exit. Oh, actually, any key to exit. Okay, we exited. Let's go ahead and run again. Okay, let's say football. Okay, there we go. Press any key. If I say N and enter, you can see pagination. It showed 10, if you saw that. Okay, let's do N again. We should see a 20 real quick. And fast, you see that 20 there? It showed. Okay, very good. So just like that, we're able to create a very fun, useful application that allows us to search for books titles, books, and it gives us everything that we need to know about that book. Now, I only got down to description. There are other things we can get from the book, such as the industry identifiers, in this case, the ISBN number and page count. So all these different things that you can actually get from this API. Right? So this is just a building block, so you can use this to make this even better. So I actually encourage you to do so. All right, there we go. This is how you would use the skills you already know and parse an API, in this case, a Google Books API, to retrieve books. All right, so I hope this was helpful. Now you know how to consume data from the internet. This gives you a lot of options right now. Instead of just building things that consume your own data on your computer, on your database, now you can go and find different APIs out there that allow you to tap into them and then consume data. So that's literally how the internet works. That's literally how most applications work. They interact with other interfaces, with other data, other servers to get data, and vice versa. So I hope this was helpful. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, like this video. And one thing I noticed is that most people who watch these videos, my videos in this channel, are actually not subscribed, which is really sad. So go ahead and subscribe if you aren't subscribed. And as always, leave some comments in the description. So actually not in the description, but in the comments section. And anything, you can just say hello. If you like my content, what other things you want me to cover in this channel, and that would be really awesome because I'm here for you. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.